James Larson built empires from glass towers in Boston, but the one thing he never built was a family. On a snowy night, a delivery boy named Oliver drops a birth certificate. James freezes. His name is on it, listed as the father. 12 years ago, he met Anna at a finance conference in New York. She lit up the room, but his ambition pulled him away. Now, her sons, Oliver and Henry, deliver food to survive while Anna lies in a hospital bed battling leukemia. James learns the truth. Anna tried to contact him for years, but his assistant blocked every letter. The guilt crashes in. James brings the twins into his home, transfers Anna to the best hospital, and promises to never walk away again. But just as their bond grows, Anna's greedy cousin threatens custody. A legal storm brews. In court, James's old assistant confesses to hiding the letters. The judge sees the truth and gives James custody. Together, they open a cafe library called Story and Hearth. On the wall hangs the very paper that changed everything. A birth certificate, once lost, now lit by lantern light. Can one snowy night rewrite a life? Subscribe to see this heartfelt story unfold. Snow drifted in slow spirals outside the 23rd floor of the Seaport Grand in Boston, blurring the view of the harbor into a fog of white. Inside a sleek, glass-walled condo, James Larson stood alone in the dim light of his kitchen, stirring a cup of black coffee he wouldn't drink. The silence wasn't new. James, 43, finance titan and CEO of Larson Equity Partners, had made a fortune moving numbers. But tonight, the only thing moving was the ache in his chest. He stared at the blinking red light on his home phone. One voicemail. From his assistant, no doubt, reminding him of a board meeting he didn't care about. He turned away from the counter. On the wall near the window hung a framed sketch from years ago, a city skyline drawn by a child. It was crooked and full of smudges. His niece had made it before she passed. It was the only handmade thing in the apartment. James sat on the edge of his designer couch and rubbed the back of his neck. The city pulsed below, full of life he no longer felt a part of. Once he had dreams of a family, laughter echoing in the hallways. Now, every surface gleamed with loneliness. The intercom buzzed. He walked over, pressing the button. "Yes?" "Food delivery for Mr. Larson," a boy's voice said. James frowned. "Leave it by the door." But seconds later, a knock followed. When he opened the door, a skinny boy stood in the hallway. 12, maybe. Snow clung to his jacket sleeves. A paper bag rested in his hands, and his breath fogged the air between them. "Here," the boy mumbled, handing the bag over. Sorry it took so long." James took the bag, nodded, but the boy hesitated. Something dropped from his coat, soft, almost weightless, a folded piece of paper. "You dropped," but the boy turned and sprinted down the hall before James could finish. The elevator dinged. He was gone. James bent and picked it up. It wasn't just paper, it was an official document, a birth certificate. He unfolded it with slow, shaking hands. The mother's name, Anna Whitmore. The child's name, Oliver Whitmore. The father, James Larson. The words blurred for a moment. He stared harder. His chest tightened. "No," he whispered. But it was there in black ink, his name. 12 years. He hadn't seen Anna since a finance conference in New York. She'd laughed at his jokes, talked about painting even though she worked in banking. He remembered the way her eyes lit up when she talked about wanting twins someday. They'd shared one weekend. Then he disappeared into business deals and boardrooms. James sank onto the couch, paper trembling in his hand. 1,000 thoughts raced through him. Was it possible? Could this be real? On the back of the certificate, in pencil, were 6 words in messy handwriting. Mom says, "Don't tell him yet." James blinked, his fingers curling around the page. Suddenly, the condo didn't feel like home. He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the falling snow. In the street below, headlights passed like ghosts. Then he whispered, barely audible even to himself, "Anna, what happened to you?" Behind him, the birth certificate lay on the coffee table, half shadowed by the soft light of the lamp. And next to it, that old crayon sketch of a skyline. Only now, he saw it differently. At the bottom of the child's drawing was a faint inscription. In blocky, hopeful letters, "Home is where your story starts." Snow clung to the sidewalks in thick, uneven sheets as James stepped outside, the cold biting through his tailored coat. The birth certificate stayed folded in his inner pocket, close to his chest. He walked quickly, without knowing exactly where he was going. The name, Oliver Whitmore, looped in his thoughts like a haunting refrain. He had to know more. He stopped by the building's front desk. "Did that delivery boy leave any name?" The concierge looked up. "Boy? Oh, yeah. Said his name was Oliver, from Good Eats Deli on Tremont." James nodded. "Thanks." Minutes later, his black SUV rolled past the downtown intersections, weaving through light traffic as snowflakes smudged the windshield. The deli came into view, a narrow storefront lit by flickering bulbs and a hand-painted sign. A paper lantern hung in the front window, glowing softly in the dark. Inside, the shop smelled of garlic, pepperoni, and old wood. James pushed the door open. A tiny bell rang overhead. A tired man at the counter glanced up. "We're closing soon. I'm looking for a boy. 12, maybe. Said his name was Oliver. Delivered here tonight." The man's shoulders stiffened. "Why? What happened?" "I need to speak to him. It's urgent." The man studied James's face for a beat, then nodded toward the back. "He works part-time with his brother. They just finished their shift." "Brother?" "Yeah. Twins. Good kids. Don't talk much, just hustle." A door creaked behind the kitchen. 2 boys stepped out, skinny, worn jackets zipped high. One of them locked eyes with James. It was him. Oliver stopped short. His hand twitched toward his pocket like he wasn't sure whether to run again. James took a step forward, voice steady. "Oliver, I think we need to talk." The boy's eyes flickered to his brother, who stood slightly behind, quieter, more watchful. "I'm not in trouble?" "No, you're not," James said gently. Oliver shifted, then slowly pulled something from his pocket. A folded envelope. "She said not to tell yet, but you found it." James nodded. "I did. Is your mom... Is she okay?" Oliver hesitated. "She's sick. Real sick." James's throat tightened. "Where is she?" The boy glanced at the deli owner, who nodded faintly. "Mass General. The low wing." James's breath hitched. The public ward. Underfunded. Crowded. He looked down at Oliver, his face sharp with worry, older than 12. "I'll go see her," James said. "Tonight." Oliver's brother finally spoke. "She doesn't know we delivered to you." James turned to him. "What's your name?" "Henry." "Well, Henry," James said softly, "I owe your mom a lot, and both of you." Henry looked away. "We just wanted her to stop crying at night." The paper lantern flickered in the window. James stared at it. "I'll make sure she never has to cry like that again," he whispered. Oliver pulled out something else, a crumpled sheet of paper. "We were going to give this if you asked." It was a drawing, childlike, sketched in pen and crayon. A tall man in a suit, 2 boys holding each of his hands. A light hung above them like a star. "That's me?" James asked. Oliver nodded. Henry drew it. I said you looked like a guy who could fix things. James swallowed. Can I keep this? The boys nodded. He folded the drawing carefully, placing it next to the birth certificate in his coat. The symbol of a past he never knew, and a future he wasn't ready to lose. James sat in the hospital parking lot, engine off, fingers curled around the steering wheel. The snow had turned to slush, streaking the windshield in gray lines. In the passenger seat, Oliver's drawing rested in his lap, the man in the suit, the boys at his sides, a light above them like a lantern in the dark. His breath fogged the glass. He hadn't seen her in 12 years. Anna Whitmore. The last time he remembered her clearly, she was standing on a balcony at a midtown hotel, hair loose, laughing at something he'd said. A finance conference had dragged him to New York. He didn't expect to meet someone so radiant. She didn't care about his portfolio. She cared about dreams, art, and warm food in small restaurants. They'd spent one golden weekend together before he vanished back into boardrooms. He had told himself she'd forget him. But she hadn't. And now, she was in this building, sick, raising twins on her own. James stepped out of the car. Inside, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and sadness. At the front desk, a nurse eyed his pressed coat and polished shoes. Visiting? Anna Whitmore, he said, voice rough. Room 218, the low-income wing. He knocked softly before entering. The room was quiet, dim. A small TV buzzed with static. Anna lay in bed, pale, thinner than he remembered, with dark circles beneath her closed eyes. But when she stirred and looked toward the door, her breath caught. James? Her voice was barely a whisper. He stepped in slowly. Hi, Anna. Tears welled in her eyes before she blinked them away. You found out. I found Oliver, he said gently. Or, he found me. Anna gave a tired smile. That boy doesn't wait for life to fix itself. There was a long pause. I saw the birth certificate, James said, pulling the paper from his coat. You listed me. I tried to tell you, she murmured. I sent letters, so many. I didn't want money, just the truth. James's chest ached. I never got them. She closed her eyes. I figured. I thought you forgot me. Anna looked at him, eyes sharp despite the fatigue. Forgot you? You were the one who left, James. You said you'd call, then disappeared. He flinched. I was young, busy. I told myself you'd moved on. I waited, for months. Then I found out I was pregnant, with twins. I wrote, and when they were 5, I tried again. He stared at her, jaw clenched. You said letters, plural. She nodded. Every year on their birthday. I even sent a photo once. James stepped back. His face went pale. His assistant, the one who'd worked with him all those years. She'd filtered everything, protected his time, protected his image. And she'd erased his family. Anna coughed, reaching for the water cup beside her. He helped steady her hand. I'm so sorry, he said. I had no idea. If I had, I believe you, she whispered. James sat beside her. The boys, they're incredible, smart, kind. Henry draws. Oliver, he writes. He handed me a sketch tonight that broke something open inside me. Anna smiled faintly. They're the best thing I've ever done. James leaned forward. I want to help. I want to be there, for all of you. You're 12 years late, she said softly. I know, he whispered, but I'm not going to miss one more moment. They sat in silence. The beeping of a heart monitor, the faint shuffle of nurses outside, and between them something began to mend. James looked at the drawing one more time. The light above the family wasn't a star. It was a lantern, a symbol of finding your way back, even after years in the dark. The next morning, James stood outside the deli again, watching his breath curl in the air. It was just after 6, and the streets were still waking up. He hadn't slept. The image of Anna's face, so fragile, yet still so fierce, haunted him. The boys arrived moments later, shuffling through snow in second-hand boots. Henry carried a thermal bag over one shoulder. Oliver clutched a notebook tight against his chest. James approached slowly. "Good morning." Oliver stiffened. Henry blinked up at him. "You really came." "I said I would," James replied. "Can I walk with you?" The twins exchanged a glance, then nodded. Together, they started down Tremont Street, weaving past closed storefronts and piles of plowed snow. "Do you do this every morning?" James asked. Oliver shrugged. "Before school, and again after. We split the tips with Mr. Hugo, but he lets us keep most of it when Mom's in the hospital." Henry's voice was quiet. "She doesn't like us doing it, but we don't want her to worry about food." James's throat tightened. "You shouldn't have to carry that. You're 12. "We're almost 13, Oliver said with a flash of pride. James smiled faintly, then looked down at Oliver's notebook. "What's in there?" Oliver hesitated. "Stories. I write things when I'm waiting for food to be ready. Henry draws the pictures sometimes. Can I see?" Oliver opened the notebook carefully and flipped to a folded page. A short story written in looping print. A boy searching for his mother in a city filled with lanterns. Each lantern held a secret message. The last one read, "Come home. I forgive you." James blinked. "This is beautiful." Henry pulled out a crumpled drawing. It matched the story. Lanterns glowing over rooftops. A boy staring up from the street. The lines were rough, but the feeling was there. Wonder. Longing. "You both did this?" James asked. Henry nodded. "We thought maybe one day we'd show Mom, when she got better." James crouched down beside them. "I want to help you finish this. Not just the story, your real life. I want to make sure your mom gets better and that both of you get what you deserve." The boys were quiet. Then Oliver said softly, "Why now?" James looked him in the eye. "Because I didn't know. I should have, but I didn't. And now that I do, I'm not walking away again." They kept walking in silence, the wind picking up. As they approached the last apartment on their delivery route, Oliver spoke again. "We sleep on the couch now. Our landlord moved someone else into our bedroom." James froze. "What?" "It's fine," Henry muttered. "Mom said it's just for a little while." A knot twisted in James's stomach. "That's not fine." He looked at the building. Run down. A cracked front step. No security, no heat. That night, he sat at his penthouse table, the boy's story and drawing laid out before him. He stared at the lanterns on the page. Then he picked up the phone. "This is James Larson. I need a private care room at Mount Clair Medical. Transfer request. Patient, Anna Whitmore." He ended the call and dialed again. This time his voice was firm. "I want the second bedroom made up. 2 twin beds. I'll pick them up myself." He folded the drawing one last time and placed it in his breast pocket. The lanterns had called, and this time he would answer. James stood at the edge of Anna's new hospital room, watching as sunlight spilled across her blanket. Everything here was quieter, calmer, private. The chaos of the old wing was gone. No beeping from half-broken machines. No curt voices from overworked nurses. Just the hum of heat and soft jazz playing faintly from a wall speaker. Anna stirred and looked toward him, her lips parting in surprise. "This isn't... Where am I?" "Mount Clair," James said gently, walking closer. "Private suite. Better care. More peace." She blinked slowly. You did this?" He nodded. The boys told me how much you've been holding together. They've done more than any kids should ever have to. This is the least I could do." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't ask for—" "I know," he said, pulling a chair beside her bed. "You never did. But you needed help, and I was supposed to give it. Years ago." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I sent so many letters." James sat down, leaning forward, his voice low and trembling. "That's what I need to tell you. My assistant at the time, she intercepted them. She thought you were trying to trap me for money or press. She never showed me a single one." Anna's brow furrowed. "She—" "What? I had no idea, Anna. I swear on my life, I would have come. I would have fought to know them, to know you." She looked away, her breathing uneven. "So I wasn't crazy." James shook his head. "No, you were alone, and it wasn't your fault." Her hand rested near the edge of the bed rail. Slowly, he reached for it. She didn't pull away. "I've missed everything," he whispered. "Their first steps, their birthdays. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving." Anna's fingers closed over his. From the hallway, soft voices echoed. A moment later, Oliver and Henry peeked in. "Mom?" Oliver asked. She smiled weakly. "Come here, sweethearts." The boys rushed in, dropping their backpacks at the door. Oliver went to her left side, Henry to the right. "We brought your tea," Henry said, pulling a small thermos from his coat. "From the deli." James smiled at the gesture, touched. "Sit with me a while," Anna said. They gathered around her bed, and James gently unfolded Oliver's lantern sketch again. He placed it beside her hand. "What's this?" she asked. "Something the boys made," James said. "A reminder of where we're going, of hope." Anna's eyes scanned the image. This is beautiful." "Oliver wrote the story," Henry said quietly. "I just did the lines." She looked at them, pride breaking through the pain. "You two amaze me." James swallowed. "I've been thinking. You need to rest, really rest, and the boys need stability, warm meals, a place to be kids again." She tensed slightly. "You're suggesting—" "I'd like them to stay with me for now," he said gently, "just until you're stronger. We'll visit you every day, and when you're ready, you'll come too." Anna's eyes welled again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was relief. "Would that be okay, boys?" she asked softly. Oliver nodded. "Your bed's too small anyway, and Mr. Larson has an elevator that talks." Henry grinned. "And a whole fridge full of juice." James chuckled. "We'll keep it stocked." Anna smiled, her eyes locking with his. "Thank you for showing up." He looked back at her, voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere." And beside the sketch, the lantern glowed in ink, an image of light returning, even in winter's longest night. 2 days later, James sat at his desk staring at a folder labeled Personnel, Archive. He hadn't opened this drawer in years. Inside were emails, old evaluations, and one envelope, still sealed, marked with Anna's name in his assistant's handwriting. He tore it open. Inside was a photo, Anna holding 2 babies wrapped in blankets. The back read, "Oliver and Henry, March 3rd. James closed his eyes, grief tightening his chest. His hand shook as he pulled out his phone. He dialed. "Claire," he said, voice low. "We need to talk, in person." Later that afternoon, in the conference room at Larson Equity, Claire, his former executive assistant, walked in, polished as ever. She smiled politely until she saw James's expression. "You wanted to see me?" James slid the photo across the table. Claire stiffened. "I found this," he said, "along with letters you never gave me." She didn't deny it. "I was trying to protect you," she said calmly. "You had just landed the New Zealand merger. The last thing you needed was someone from your past showing up with a sob story." James's jaw tightened. It wasn't a sob story. It was my story. Claire folded her arms. I did what I thought was best. He stood, eyes blazing. You played God with my life, with theirs. She opened her mouth, but James cut her off. You're no longer welcome in this company, Claire. Pack up your things. Claire's face hardened. She left without another word. Back at the condo that night, James found Henry sitting by the window, sketching in silence. James crouched beside him. What are you drawing? Henry turned the sketchbook around. It was a courtroom, half in shadow, half in light. On one side stood a man with his hands open, on the other a figure with crossed arms and a paper shredder behind her. James exhaled. That's pretty accurate. Henry smiled shyly. Oliver said you were mad today. James nodded. I was, but it's over now. Oliver appeared from the hallway, holding a stack of papers. Mom used to say the truth always comes out, even if someone hides it in a drawer. He handed the stack to James. These are her old letters. She let us keep copies. She said if something ever happened to her, we should know what she tried to do. James held the pages like they were made of glass, his own name written in Anna's careful cursive. Paragraphs filled with updates, birthday wishes, little jokes about the twins. I can't believe I never saw these, he whispered. Henry looked up. Do you still want us here? James dropped to one knee, his voice trembling. I didn't just want you here, I needed you. I didn't know it yet, but I did. He pulled them both into a hug. From the table nearby, the lantern drawing lay folded beneath the photo of Anna and the boys as babies. He picked them up and placed them side by side. Symbols of what had been lost, and what could still be rebuilt. Later, after the boys went to bed, James sat alone on the balcony, city lights flickering below him. Snow drifted through the sky again. He looked at the skyline, then down at the two images in his hand. The woman who had tried, the children who had waited, and the man who had finally opened his eyes. He wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. But for the first time in years, James Larson knew exactly what he was fighting for. 3 weeks passed like a blink. James had learned more about parenting in 21 days than in 43 years of life. Mornings were cereal spilled on marble counters. Evenings, late-night story readings and questions like, do you think dragons could live in Boston if they liked the snow? One Thursday morning, James stood in the condo's newly furnished library, watching Henry sketch by the window. Oliver sat beside him, writing furiously in his notebook. Look what I made, Dad, Oliver said, lifting a page. It was a new chapter of his story, this one titled The Lantern Keeper's Promise. James took the paper gently. Dad, he repeated, like it was a foreign word on his tongue, and the sweetest one. But the warmth of the moment broke when his phone rang. Unknown caller. He answered. This is James. A slow, drawling voice replied, Name's Carl Huxley. Anna's cousin. I heard the boy's been staying at your place. James's jaw clenched. Yes, they are. Well, Carl continued, I just filed for temporary custody. Blood runs deep, and I've been there for Anna. You? You haven't. James stepped into his office, shutting the door. You filed what? I've got rights, Carl said, and a lawyer. Wouldn't want the court to think the big CEO's buying his way into fatherhood now, would we? James's voice dropped. If this is about money. Oh, it's about family, Carl interrupted. But don't worry. I'll be seeing you. In court. Click. James stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear. Then he opened his laptop, called his attorney, and said only one word. Prepare everything. That evening, James picked up the boys from school himself. As they buckled into the back seat, Oliver noticed the tension in his eyes. Did something happen? He asked. James hesitated. There's someone who thinks he should take care of you two instead of me." Henry frowned. "Who?" "Your mom's cousin, Carl." Oliver's voice rose. "He never visits her. He only shows up when he wants something." James nodded. "I know, but the law needs proof. We're going to fight this, I promise." Henry reached forward, placing his small hand on James's shoulder. "We're with you." That night, James sat by Anna's bedside at Mount Clare. She looked stronger, color back in her cheeks, her voice no longer thin. "I need to tell you something," James said. "Carl is trying to take the boys, filed a motion." Anna's eyes darkened. "He's circling for inheritance. He always has. I told him to stay away." James nodded. "I'm going to stop him, but I need you to write a letter, a notarized one. State that your wishes are for them to stay with me." Anna sat up straighter. "I'll do more than that. I'll testify, if I have to." James touched her hand. "We'll protect them. Together." As he left her room, his phone buzzed again. A text from his attorney. "We'll need DNA confirmation. Birth certificate isn't enough." James stared at the message. Back home, Oliver was sitting in bed, lantern drawing beside him. It had changed. Now, the lantern's beam reached toward a man holding hands with two boys. Below it, Oliver had scribbled, "He didn't find us. We found him." James sat beside him, heart full. "Hey, bud, I need to ask you something important. We'll have to do a DNA test." Oliver nodded. "To prove we're really yours?" James paused, then smiled. "To prove what we already know." Oliver handed him the sketch. "Then let's prove it." Outside, snow began to fall again, but this time James didn't feel the cold. James paced the hallway outside the DNA clinic, a clipboard pressed to his chest. Through the glass window, Oliver and Henry sat side by side, swinging their legs from the exam table. A nurse gently swabbed each of their cheeks while they giggled at something only twins could understand. When they came out, Oliver looked up and asked, "Will the test tell us if we belong?" James knelt. "You belong. No test could ever prove more than I already know." Back at the condo, something shifted. James had converted the guest room into a shared space for the boys. Where there were once sterile white walls, now hung pages of sketches and story drafts. Henry's charcoal drawings curled under the edges of painter's tape. Oliver's fantasy tales stacked high on the desk. A lamp with a soft amber glow lit the corner, a replica of the lantern he had drawn. After dinner, Henry pulled James into the living room. "I want to show you something." He opened his sketchbook to a new page. It was the outline of a house, big windows, bookshelves carved into every wall, and a sign over the front porch that read, "Story and Hearth." Oliver peeked around his brother's shoulder. "It's a library. And a cafe. For kids like us, who don't have a place to go after school." James smiled, moved. "You designed this?" Henry nodded. "Together." He wrote the name. I drew the walls. James picked up the page carefully, as if it might crumble from meaning. "You know, that's not a bad idea." Oliver's eyes lit up. "Really?" "I mean," James said, "I've got investment money, a construction team, and a lot of guilt I'd love to channel into something good." Henry laughed. "We could hang our stories on the wall." Oliver added, "And serve Mom's lemon tea." James froze for a moment, heart caught in his throat. "Yes," he said quietly, "and her tea." That night, after the boys had gone to bed, James stood in front of a fresh bookcase he'd had installed. He slid Oliver's first draft of The Lantern Keeper's Promise onto the top shelf beside Henry's framed sketch of the imagined cafe. He whispered to himself, "This is how we start over." The next morning, James brought the boys to visit Anna. Her cheeks had more color, her eyes brighter. "Mom!" Oliver rushed to her side. "We showed Dad the design." Henry held up the sketch. "We want to build a place called Story and Hearth." Anna's voice cracked as she traced the drawing. "It's beautiful." just like you two." James pulled out a small folder. "Anna, we got the DNA results. They're conclusive." She didn't need to look. "I never doubted it," she whispered. Then James added, "I also filed official paperwork. I want to become their legal guardian. So, if anything happens, they'll never be left in limbo again." Anna's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand. "Thank you for showing up, for staying." "I should have been here sooner," James said. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Before they left, Henry handed Anna a copy of the lantern sketch. But this time, something new had been added. James's silhouette, standing beside the twins, holding the lantern high. "It's yours," Henry said softly. "So you always remember who lit the way." Anna held it to her chest, eyes brimming, and for the first time in years, her smile didn't look tired. It looked like hope. Snow fell gently outside the courthouse as James stepped from the black SUV, holding Oliver's hand while Henry walked close beside. He wore a dark wool coat, but the real weight sat beneath his ribs, the weight of what this day could mean. Inside the courtroom, Carl Huxley sat with his attorney, arms crossed, jaw smug. He hadn't looked at the boys once. James leaned toward his lawyer, whispering, "Do we have everything?" Anna's notarized statement, the DNA proof, records of Carl's absence. She replied calmly, "But he'll fight dirty. Be ready." The judge entered. Everyone stood. As the hearing began, Carl took the stand first. "Those boys are blood," he said, straightening his tie. "They're Mama's family. She's sick, real sick. I've always looked out for her, always." James watched, jaw clenched. Lies tasted worse when served with charm. Then, Carl's lawyer held up a photo. James at a black tie gala 6 months ago. "This man," Carl said, "only wants the boys now because it makes him look good. PR. Sympathy. Legacy." James rose, voice steady. "That's not true. You left her," Carl snapped. "You had your chance." "I didn't know," James replied firmly. "I was lied to." Gasps echoed when James's attorney presented the intercepted letters one by one, each sealed envelope Anna had written over the years. Then came the biggest blow. James's former assistant, summoned to testify. "I made a mistake," she said, eyes low. "I thought the letters were a scam. I never gave them to Mr. Larson." The courtroom fell silent. Even Carl blinked. The judge called for a recess. Outside the courtroom, Oliver and Henry huddled with James on a bench. "Is he gonna win?" Henry asked. "No," James said, "because the truth is finally in the room." Carl passed by with his attorney, sneering. "You think money buys love, James? You think that's all it takes?" James stood. "No. I think showing up, staying through the hard parts and fighting for them, that's what love takes, and I'm here." Back inside, Anna appeared, frail but standing, her hospital bracelet still around her wrist. She walked to the stand with slow steps, but held her head high. "I asked James to raise them," she said. "He didn't abandon us. He didn't know. But he came when he found out, and he's never left since." Then she lifted a drawing Henry had given her, the lantern sketch with the three of them together. "This," she said, voice quivering, "this is their family." Carl tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand. "Enough." That afternoon, the court recessed again. Outside, Anna sat beside James on a wooden bench, the cold biting at their hands. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to reach you," she whispered. James looked at her, full of quiet sorrow. "You did. You never stopped. I just didn't know how to listen." Henry came running, out of breath. "Dad, the lawyer said the judge is coming back." James looked at Anna. "You ready?" She nodded. "Let's finish this." As they walked inside, the snow outside thickened. blanketing the city in quiet white. But James didn't feel lost anymore. For the first time in years, he was walking into something that felt like home. The morning after the courtroom testimony, James sat at his dining table, surrounded by documents spread like puzzle pieces, each one part of the life he should have known. He rubbed his temples. Across from him, Oliver poured cereal, his brow furrowed. "Are we really going to have to live with Uncle Carl?" the boy asked softly. James looked up. "No, I won't let that happen." Henry shuffled in, still in pajama pants, carrying a sketch pad. "I drew what the courtroom looked like," he mumbled. He turned the pad. There they were, sitting together with Anna watching from the bench. A lantern hung above them, glowing. James stared at the drawing. "You kept that lantern in your pictures," he said. "Why?" "Because it means we're not lost anymore," Henry said. That single sentence grounded James. He stood and walked to the living room where his legal team was waiting. "We need to be prepared for anything Carl tries to pull next." His lawyer nodded. "He's persistent, but we've got Anna's notarized custody wishes, the birth certificate, and the DNA results." "Is that enough?" James asked. "Usually, yes, but Carl's playing a different game. He just filed a motion challenging the boy's well-being under your care. He claims emotional instability, media attention, even manipulation." James clenched his jaw. "He's grasping at straws." "Still, it means we need more than facts," she replied. "We need heart, letters, journals, maybe the boy's own words." Later that afternoon, James visited Anna's hospital room. She was asleep, pale and weak, but peaceful. Beside her bed sat a small box. The nurse whispered, "She asked us to give this to you, said it would help." Inside the box were drawings, Oliver's early scribbles, Henry's sketches, but beneath them was a letter dated 5 years ago. "James, I don't want anything from you. I just want our boys to know where they come from. You deserve to know them, and maybe they deserve to know you." He swallowed hard. The letter shook in his hand, but not from cold. That night, back home, he called Oliver and Henry into the study. "I want to ask something important," he said. "Would you both be okay writing something for the court? Just how you feel?" Oliver tilted his head. "Like a school essay?" "More like a story. Just yours. Your truth." Henry looked at his brother. "I'll draw mine. You write yours." They nodded in silent agreement, and James felt the weight shift slightly. Not vanish, but shift. Over the next few days, their home filled with quiet sounds, pencils scratching paper, pages turning, James pacing softly. He gathered photocopies, school records, grocery receipts, anything showing a real life was forming. Carl didn't stop. He showed up at the apartment building, trying to get the doorman to let him in. He called reporters, feeding stories to tabloids. Finance shark claims lost family, while real kin left behind. James read one headline and calmly turned the page. They submitted the full packet to the judge on Friday. James included the drawing of the lantern with the boy's letters and Anna's note. On the final page, Henry had drawn something new, a bookshelf, towering and full, with 2 ladders leading up. At the top were 3 stick figures, one holding a pen, one holding a pencil, and one holding a lantern. James smiled. For the first time in years, he wasn't just fighting to keep what mattered, he was building something with it. The courtroom was colder than usual, or maybe it was just the weight of what today meant. James adjusted his tie and looked at Oliver and Henry seated beside him, each dressed in navy blazers and holding tight to the folders containing their letters and drawings. Anna wasn't present. Her doctors insisted she rest. But James carried her spirit in the worn letter she'd once written him, now sealed in a manila envelope. Carl sat smugly on the opposite bench, arms crossed, a flashy attorney whispering into his ear. The judge entered. "All rise." James stood. So did the boys, and for a moment the silence was deafening. Then the trial resumed. Carl's attorney was first. "Your Honor, we contend that Mr. Larson's sudden involvement in these children's lives is more performative than paternal. He has resources, yes, but where was he for 12 years? The judge raised an eyebrow. "And your client?" "My client, Mr. Carl Denslow, is a blood relative, involved in the boy's upbringing since birth." James's lawyer rose calmly. "May I?" The judge nodded. "We have Anna Whitmore's notarized letter," she began, unfolding the document. In it, she names James Larson, the boy's legal father, and expresses her full wish for him to have custody should anything happen to her. Carl scoffed. "Convenient." Then James's former assistant, Margaret, took the stand. Her hands trembled. I was the one who intercepted the letters," she said, voice cracking. "I thought Anna was seeking money and I didn't want James distracted. I never told him." "Why come forward now?" the judge asked. "Because I see now. I stole years he'll never get back," Margaret whispered. "I was wrong." The courtroom grew still. James rose slowly. "Your Honor, I don't have 12 years of school plays, scraped knees, or bedtime stories. But I have right now, and I won't let it slip away." He turned to Oliver and Henry. "Boys?" Oliver stood, heart pounding, but sure. "This is what I wrote," he said, unfolding his paper. "I didn't know who my dad was, but when I met Mr. Larson, he didn't run. He stayed. He helped Mom. He talks to me about books. He reads what I write. He listens. That's what dads do." Henry held up his drawing, an image of a lighthouse with 3 figures at the base and light reaching far across stormy waves. "I don't want to leave," he said softly. "I don't want to start over again." Carl shifted in his seat, suddenly quiet. The judge leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. "I've heard enough." She looked between the two parties. "There's no question these children belong with Mr. Larson. The mother's wishes, the boy's words, and the facts all align. Custody is granted to James Larson. Visitation with Mr. Denslow may be considered upon further review." James closed his eyes. Oliver's hand gripped his. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited, but James didn't stop. He simply knelt, arms open. Henry ran into him first. Then Oliver joined. The wind tugged at their coats, but none of them felt cold. James whispered, "Thank you for trusting me." Oliver smiled. "Look what we made, Dad." Henry opened his sketchbook. On the last page was the lighthouse again, but now the storm had cleared, and at the top of the tower the lantern glowed red, gold, and blue. James nodded. "Let's take this light home." The morning after the court ruling, James stood in the boys' new room, sunlight pouring through the window. The walls were painted soft blue, shelves filled with books and art supplies. A framed copy of Henry's lighthouse drawing hung between their twin beds. It was their beacon now. Downstairs, breakfast sizzled. James flipped pancakes while Oliver set the table and Henry poured orange juice with laser focus. "Dad," Oliver said, the words still fresh, still uncertain on his tongue, "can we bring Mom something today? Maybe your French toast?" James looked up. "We'll bring her French toast, a sketchbook, and a story draft. Sound good?" Henry grinned. "Perfect." At the hospital, Anna lay resting, pale but awake. Her IV lines glowed gently in the filtered light. James knocked softly and entered, the boys racing ahead of him. "Mom," Henry whispered, crawling up beside her. "I drew you something." He pulled out a folded paper, a drawing of her in bed, with him, Oliver, and James sitting around holding her hands. Anna touched the page with trembling fingers. "I love it," she whispered. James sat beside her, gently placing a food container on the tray. "I didn't get to be here for the first 12 years," he said quietly, "but I'm here now, every morning, every breath." Anna blinked, eyes wet. "I never stopped hoping." Oliver leaned in. "I call him Dad now. It feels right." James's voice cracked. "And it feels like home." They stayed for hours, sharing stories, sketches, quiet laughter. The hospital room became a little sanctuary of memory and promise. Later that night, back at the condo, James brought out a small box from his office closet. "What's that?" Henry asked. "It belonged to my dad," James replied. "I haven't opened it in years." Inside was an old lantern, brass, slightly tarnished, but sturdy. "He used to take me camping," James said softly. "We'd light this and tell stories by it. It always made me feel safe." Henry reached for it. "Can we keep it in our room?" James nodded. "I think it belongs there now." The next evening, James stood in a crowded bookstore cafe downtown, an idea brewing. He turned to Oliver. "What if we built something? A place, with books and art and stories. Yours, Henry's, your mom's favorites. We'd call it something warm, something that feels like family." Oliver's eyes widened. "Like story and hearth?" James froze, then smiled. "Exactly like that." Henry beamed. "Can we paint the walls ourselves?" "And pick the books?" Oliver added. "We'll do it all," James said. "Together." Back home, as the lantern flickered between their beds, Oliver whispered into the dim light, "This is the best chapter yet." James stood at the doorway, listening. His heart, once hollow with regret, now beat to the rhythm of small voices, of laughter, of stories beginning again. He placed his hand on the doorframe and whispered back, "And the next page is even better." 3 months later, the corner of Tremont and Appleton Street looked nothing like it used to. Where a shuttered laundromat once stood, warm amber lights now glowed through tall cafe windows. A hand-painted wooden sign swung gently in the breeze. Story and hearth. Inside, the smell of fresh bread mixed with brewed coffee and old pages. Shelves lined the walls, filled with novels, children's books, and sketchbooks. In the center sat a circular table where kids gathered to draw and write. Henry's lighthouse drawing hung above the fireplace, framed in oak. Beneath it, Oliver's typed story sat open for anyone to read. At the counter, James adjusted the apron he never thought he'd wear. "You ready?" he asked. Oliver stood tall in his striped sweater, holding a laminated menu he helped design. "I've got the register." Henry tugged at his sleeve. "And I'll be handing out bookmarks." James grinned. "And what's on those bookmarks?" Henry proudly pulled one out. In bold letters it read, "This place exists because one boy dropped a piece of paper." In the corner, a small display case held that very piece of paper, the birth certificate Oliver had dropped that snowy night. It was mounted behind glass, lit softly by an old brass lantern. A card beneath it read, "The moment everything changed." As the first customers walked in, neighbors, bookstore lovers, a few curious passers-by, James stepped aside to let the boys lead. A little girl picked up a bookmark and pointed to the birth certificate. "Is that real?" she asked. Oliver nodded. "That's how we found our dad." James's throat tightened. He wiped his hands on his apron and glanced toward the back room, where Anna rested with a mug of tea. Though still healing, she looked better, her cheeks fuller, her eyes clearer. "You built all this?" she whispered, running a hand over the counter. "We built it," James said, "together." Outside, snowflakes began to fall again, soft as the night that started everything. Through the window, the lantern's light flickered gently, casting warm shadows over the cafe. Henry pulled James toward the reading area. "Dad, you promised you'd read the first story." He took the book, a handmade compilation of Oliver's adventures, bound with twine and love, and sat between the boys. Around them, other families gathered. Some sipped coffee, others read quietly, but all eyes turned when James began. In a city of glass towers and silent elevators, he read aloud, a man thought he had everything, until a boy with cold hands and a warm heart reminded him what mattered most. The room grew still. The air buzzed not with noise, but with meaning. As James read, he looked up and met Anna's gaze. She smiled, the kind of smile that said, "We did it." By the end of the chapter, Oliver had leaned his head against James's shoulder, and Henry had taken his hand. James closed the book. "That's chapter 1, he said. A woman in the crowd spoke up. "Is there a second chapter?" James looked down at his sons, then back at the crowd. "We're living it." The morning after the cafe's soft opening, sunlight spilled through the windows of Astorian hearth, golden and gentle. James stood by the counter, a steaming cup of herbal tea in hand. Behind him, the fireplace crackled softly. Anna sat curled in a velvet armchair nearby, her head wrapped in a soft scarf, cheeks now full with returning color. Henry crouched on the floor, sketching a picture of the cafe exterior, a glowing lantern over the door, the family framed inside. Oliver paced with excitement. "Mom, did you see the review? Someone from the Boston Weekly was here yesterday." James smiled, watching Anna beam. "That's your doing," he said. "They saw your writing posted on the wall." Anna glanced up, emotion catching in her throat. "He's you know. All that creativity, that spark." James knelt beside Henry, brushing a stray curl from his son's forehead. "And he's you," he replied. "Strong, quiet, steady." Henry held up the drawing. "I'm going to hang this by the door so everyone knows what this place means." Outside, snow had finally melted. Crocuses bloomed near the steps. Change was in the air, not loud or sudden, but deep, like soil shifting for spring. James turned back toward the kitchen. On the far wall they had added something new. That morning, a shadow box. Inside it was the lantern James had once kept on his balcony, the one that had guided him during nights alone. Now it glowed softly above Oliver's birth certificate. Anna stood and approached him slowly. She reached out, touching the glass. "Funny," she whispered. "You never noticed the light until it showed you the truth." James wrapped his arms around her gently. "I had everything, but nothing that truly mattered until that night." Footsteps echoed near the door. It was the twins' school principal. She'd brought a box of donated books, smiling as the boys raced to help. James followed them, stopping to glance back. Anna, with her hand still resting on the lantern's case, gave him a small, knowing nod. Later that day, after closing, the four of them stayed behind, tidying up the cafe. James wiped tables. Oliver reorganized the reading nook. Henry added new artwork to the kids' wall. Anna labeled spice jars in the kitchen, humming a song James vaguely remembered from New York 12 years ago. As dusk settled in, Henry climbed into James's lap and handed him a folded paper. "What's this?" James asked. "A story," Henry whispered. "Oliver wrote it, and I did the cover." James opened it. The title read, "The Lantern's Call to Fatherhood." He swallowed hard. It began with a lonely man in a tall building, and ended with a warm cafe, a glowing lantern, and a family held together by stories, drawings, and second chances. Oliver leaned in. "We wanted to tell the truth, the whole truth." James looked at his sons, at Anna resting nearby, at the quiet lantern flickering in its box. "I don't deserve all of this," he said softly. "But you stayed," Anna replied. "That's what matters." As night fell over Boston and the cafe's sign lit once more, James switched off the final light inside. Only the lantern remained glowing, casting a soft halo over the certificate, over the names that had once been lost in silence, now spoken every day with love. The boys linked arms with him as they stepped outside. "Come on, Dad," Oliver said, grinning. "Let's go home."